Hi, everybody. It's Kelli Robinson, the Prelaw Advisor in the Matthews Center for Career Development, and welcome to the recording of the program Law School Admissions for the upcoming 2023-2024 cycle. I'm going to share my screen in a little bit. I have a slide deck that I'd like to share with you, and if you have any questions, certainly reach out to me, schedule an appointment to meet with me via handshake, or take advantage of my drop-in advising that I have every Tuesday afternoon from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the Matthews Center, which is located on the second floor in Alvarez. If you haven't had a chance to come visit us, please stop by. So let's go ahead and get started. And here we are talking about the application process for the upcoming 2023-2024 cycle. So if you are planning on applying to, to law school next fall, then this information is going to be helpful and relevant to you. One thing that I did want to point out is a lot of the information that I'm going to be talking about can be found on a Google site that I created called Prelaw at Davidson. And I have the slide deck available. This is actually hyperlinked in this slide deck. But as you can see, a lot of the different topics related to applying to law school can be found here at this website. So the types of law degrees, application components that we'll be talking about, LSAT information, how to research and finance schools. So a lot of questions that you may have, or a lot of resources that will be helpful to you, can be found at this particular website. You can also find it in Handshake. If you go to the resources section in Handshake and search Prelaw Guide, you'll be taken to this Google site. So let's first get into talking about the application components of law school. And you'll see that it's very similar to the application components that you likely filed when you were applying to undergraduate schools. You will have the standardized application that you'll need to complete for each law school. You will be requested to send copies of transcripts from undergraduate institutions that you have attended. So obviously Davidson, as well as if you have taken a course since high school at a community college, or if you transferred from another college or university, you will be asked to supply the transcripts of those particular institutions as well. Letters of recommendation are going to come typically from faculty. If you are applying to law school within 1 to 2 years of graduating from undergraduate, law schools do tend to have a preference for those letters of recommendation coming from faculty or professors, but pay close attention to any requirements or suggestions that each individual law school has. The standardized test, the LSAT, is the traditional standardized exam that most students will take for admission into law school. However, some law schools, and increasingly more each year, law schools are considering the GRE, which is the graduate record examination, in lieu of the LSAT. The GRE used to be, or is typically, the standardized test that students will take for admission into graduate school. And law schools have continually started to accept the GRE as an appropriate standardized test to submit. 2 caveats about the standardized tests. 1, most law schools are still requiring a standardized test, unlike undergraduate institutions, that many of which are going test optional. Most schools are still requiring that the standardized test be submitted. Number 2, if you are trying to decide between taking the LSAT or taking the GRE, it is a decision that you want to make before you take the LSAT. Once you take the LSAT, you are considered an LSAT candidate, and that is the score, or that's the type of the exam that they are going to review. You're also going to be writing your essays, personal statements, essays regarding why you are interested in a particular law school, any other essay topics. Each law school is different in terms of the types of additional essays that they might want you to submit. So again, pay close attention to the application criteria for the schools that you're considering. You may also find yourself writing an addendum. An addendum is a separate written statement that is used to explain something about your application. Basically, if there is a story behind the material that you might be presenting, related to coursework, related to your GPA, related to an LSAT score, for example, that you think that an explanation is warranted, you would want to address it in the addendum. There is also, for many, they will have this as a separate addendum if you need to submit a what's called character and fitness addendum. Character and fitness addendum is when you have to address something in your record, whether it be an academic record, a student conduct record, or a criminal record. And you do want to disclose this information and are required to disclose this information to law schools. If you have questions about what needs to be disclosed or how to disclose that information and write that addendum, that's something that we can talk about in an appointment. I want to take the time to talk about LSAC, Law School Admissions Council. If you are not familiar with this organization or familiar with this website, you are going to become familiar with it since you are going to be starting the process of applying to law school. The LSAC is where all of your application approaches, materials, strategies, etc., take place. I'm going to actually share my screen really quickly to go and show you the actual LSAC site, so lsac.org, and you can see that there is a lot of good information on here that really could start with, discovering law. So there's a lot of good information to take a look at. When you register for the LSAT, which is typically your first official step into applying to law school, you will do this through Law School Admissions Council. You can see that there is also information on how to choose a law school, the steps of how you apply to law school. The LSAC website is where you are going to submit all of your materials as part of your law school applications. So if you haven't bookmarked it already, I definitely suggest that you do. So the big component with regard to LSAC is what's called their Credential Assembly Services, or CAS. Think of CAS as the common app for law schools. So if you use the common app in your application for undergraduate schools, it's very similar in the sense that CAS is the centralized, sort of standardized hub for where all of your application materials are going to be submitted, that you then will select to have those materials sent to the law schools to which you are applying. There is a $195 fee to subscribe to LSAC, or I'm sorry, to the Credential Assembly Service, or to CAS. Lots of acronyms floating around. What that includes is a summary of all of your transcripts that you have sent. So essentially, they are going to take any grades that you have earned at domestic institutions and present a standardized GPA and a standardized summary of all those particular courses, in addition to the individual transcripts that will be sent to the law schools. They are going to process your letters of recommendation. So essentially, your letter writers are going to submit the letters of recommendation to your LSAC account, where they will be housed, and you determine which letters you want to go to which particular schools. They're going to process the electronic applications for all of the law schools. And then they also create a law school report. You are required to send one of these law school reports to each of the schools to which you apply, and it is a $45 fee for each of the law school reports. What this law school report does is, again, standardizes and streamlines the information to present to law schools regarding your academics, your GPA, and your LSAT history. So academics is going to standardize how the transcripts are presented, and it will again show those school-specific grades, as well as the converted grades to LSAC, as well as the standardized grade point average that they will calculate for you. The law school report will also have an LSAT section that will show all of your engagement with the exam, any exams that you have taken in the past, and whether or not those scores have been canceled, or if you kept the score, what that score was, as well as any future LSATs that you have registered for. And it's highly recommended that you register for CAS 6 to 8 weeks before the first deadline of the schools to which you are applying. So I want to take a minute to talk about LSAT parameters, which is really why we are having this, or I'm presenting this particular program in the fall semester, because you can take the LSAT for up to 3 times in one testing cycle. It is highly recommended that the strategy for beginning your application process is, if you are planning on applying in the fall semester, that you take your first LSAT. The goal is to take your first LSAT that summer before the fall that you want to be applying. To do that, you want to allow ample time to study and prepare for that LSAT, which means your preparation for studying should start in the spring semester of your junior year, or the spring before the fall that you want to apply. So that's why we're having this conversation now, is to help you get prepared for what could your spring semester look like, to allow adequate time for you to study for the exam to take in the summer between your junior and your senior year. Typically, you want to look at 2 to 3 months of studying of 20 to 25 hours a week to help you possibly secure a competitive LSAT score. So again, you can take the LSAT up to 3 times in one testing cycle. Typically, students will take it more than once, but obviously not necessary. The scores remain good for 5 years. The format, if you're not familiar with it, it is a multiple choice exam plus an LSAT writing section. You actually complete the exam on a particular testing date that is chosen by LSAC. The LSAT writing portion, you don't have to complete the day of the exam. You have a window of opportunity after you complete the exam to complete that LSAT writing section. If you're not familiar, the LSAT is now taken at a location of your choice. So gone are the days when you had to report to a specific location on a specific day, early in the morning, to take the exam. The application is administered electronically and can be taken at any setting that you wish. And you will sign up to take an exam when they are offered, and you will be given of that month that it's being offered, which usually is 2 days. So for example, in October, the dates might be October 10th and 11th, usually a Friday and a Saturday, that you can sign up to take the October sitting, and you will be assigned well in advance the particular day and time that you will be taking the LSAT. LSAC in the past couple of years has instituted what's called a score preview option. So if you recall, it used to be kind of like the SAT and the ACT, that you took the exam and then you got your scores, and that was that. And once your scores were released to you, they were final, and those were the scores that you could choose to release to the schools. Same thing used to be true for law school, that you would take the exam and you had to decide that day if you were feeling confident and wanted to keep the potential score, or if you wanted to cancel the score. Now with the score preview, you have the option, if you sign up for the score preview, to receive your score and then decide within a certain amount of time if you want to cancel that score or not. And so if you sign up prior to the first day of testing for your test, it's $45 to do the score preview for each exam. And if you sign up within 2 days after your test, it is a $75 fee to do the score preview. Scores are received usually a couple weeks after you take the exam. Just a word about the score cancellation. I encourage students, if we're working together, for you to come chat with me, because I'm hearing about students who are canceling scores that I think were competitive scores. They maybe weren't as high as the students had wished, but I can say from the advising perspective, those were scores that I think were worthy of being kept and being viewed by law schools. So if you opt to do the score preview, I would just say, come and chat with me before deciding whether or not a score should be canceled. But be thinking about, if you're going to be applying in the fall, be thinking about how you can strategize your spring semester. Is it possible that you can take 3 courses instead of 4? Is it possible that you can structure your schedule so that you have 1 or 2 days where you do not have classes? So you can consider yourself enrolled in a class, whether you do it formally or not, to help prepare for the LSAT. We've been talking up to this point about a lot of particular have-tos and necessary things to sign up for that do have a cost associated with them. And, the cost of law school, we always hear about the cost of law school and tuition and how much it does cost. I think it's important for students to realize that the cost of law school actually starts well before you are paying that first tuition bill for your law school education. And so it is a pricey process. And I wanted to make sure that you were aware of some funding resources to help you throughout the application process. The first would be to be sure to look into the LSAC fee waiver program. You're going to apply to a fee waiver through your LSAC account. You have to complete a fee waiver application at least 6 weeks prior to the LSAT registration deadline. And so it's a tiered system with different benefits in each tier. And so basically you apply for the fee waiver, and there are going to be, based on your demonstrated financial need, certain tiers that you could qualify for. Really consider looking into this program. If you apply, the worst that can happen is that you're denied, but you'll never know if you can qualify for a fee waiver unless you do submit the application. How the fee waiver can be helpful is that depending on the tier for which you might qualify for, is the LSAT registration fee can be waived, and or the credential assembly service fee can be waived, and or portions of your the number of law school reports that you have to file, those fees can be waived. And typically, when students receive an LSAC fee waiver, most of the law schools will waive their individual application fees. So yes, that's correct. In addition to the fees that you pay for LSAC for the services and the testing administration, each law school is going to have its application that does require a fee that can be on average anywhere from $65 to $100. So again, if you qualify for a fee waiver, those individual fees can be waived. I also wanted to point out here in the Matthews Center, the professional development funding that we have available for students to apply to. This professional development funding is available to students each year, and you can apply for the professional development funding each year. And you can see the amount that can be put toward professional development funding in one academic year. And of that, how much can be put toward postgraduate application fees. So students have taken advantage of the professional development funding for a wide variety of reasons. You could use it to apply towards discounting your application fees, towards discounting registration for the LSAT. If you want to sign up for a test prep course, the professional development funding could be put towards that. If you want to know more about the professional development funding option, just check out in the resources section in Handshake, Professional Development Funding Guide, and all of the information, criteria, and application form can be found there. Some thoughts that I wanted to offer about researching law schools. And again, as you and I are working together, we can talk about this in more detail as it fits to your specific criteria in terms of what you are looking for. But this is information that I find myself talking about a lot with students when I'm talking to them. It's important to determine what's important to you, making your own list of criteria in terms of what you are looking for in a law school, be it cost is a factor, location, community, opportunities, statistics regarding outcomes as far as employment. While all of these are going to be important in some capacity, everyone's going to have criteria that's different for them. So I encourage you to make that list of what's important to you. I think it's also helpful and really critical to keep in mind that your GPA and your LSAT do not determine whether or not you are admitted to law school. Your GPA and your LSAT can help you determine what schools might be considered, where you might be considered a reach applicant, which schools where you might be considered a competitive applicant, and which schools where you might be considered a strong applicant. Law schools look at applications holistically. Your letters of recommendation, your essays, your resume, and all of the other information that you submit is just as important and is read just as much as the GPA and the LSAT when it comes to making decisions about admission and when it comes to making decisions about financial opportunities. Use multiple resources to look for and learn about law schools. We have one such resource coming up on campus next week, November 1st from 11 to 1. Here in the Union, we will be hosting the Law School Fair. First time it's being hosted in person since 2019, so we're pretty excited about that, where we'll be having admission representatives from law schools from across the country attending to talk about their particular programs and to talk about the admissions process. Again, the pre-law guide that I referenced in the second slide that can also be found in Handshake has a section about researching law schools that lists numerous resources that you can be using to help learn about and find particular law schools. LSAC itself has many particular resources that you can be utilizing. It has, for example, let me just go back here and share. If we take a look under the section choosing a law school, they have this particular site, official guide to ABA approved JD programs, where this can be a great place to start searching for what schools could be considered reach, competitive, and safety, because it lets you search by particular keyword, or it lets you search by particular academic credentials, such as your LSAT and your GPA. And what it will do is it can generate for you, again, just based on those two criteria, which we know you cannot look at solely alone, what your likelihood of admission is at particular schools. So this can help you determine perhaps what might be a safety school if the likelihood of admission is high, what might be a reach school if the likelihood of admission is a little bit lower, and what might be a competitive to reach or competitive to safety school. So that is one particular resource that you can use through LSAC. There are many other resources in the events section. Every year, LSAC hosts what they call law school forums. Some of these take place in person. Some of them take place virtually. The ones that are in person are usually held at larger cities. So DC, New York, Boston, LA. The closest one to us usually takes place in Atlanta. And so you can see, the different events that are taking place and the opportunity to sign up for them and hear about what particular schools are going to be in attendance. Also, take a look at LSAC's Candidate Referral Service, or CRS, again, another acronym. The Candidate Referral Service is something that you can sign up for. It's free. It's actually something you can sign up for that's free. And what that allows you to do is when you select the candidate referral service, that puts your name on a list that law schools can get in touch with you. I have talked to many applicants who have found law schools that they would otherwise not have considered if they hadn't signed up for the CRS. And many of the law schools that get in touch with candidates through CRS are willing to waive those application fees. So again, why not sign up for it? It's a great way to learn about particular institutions. So I like to leave with, some I would suggest. And these are just nuggets of information that I suggest to students about these particular areas, some of which I've already mentioned, but some I'd like to mention here. When it comes to the LSAT, I like to suggest that you practice where you plan to take it. As I mentioned, you now take the LSAT from anywhere. So if you plan, you can take it in your apartment. You could take it in the library if you're on campus. If you wanted to reserve a room in the Matthews Center, you could certainly do that. If it's possible, at least take one practice exam where you plan to take that exam so that you can get used to that particular setting and sitting there and taking an exam for 2 hours. As I mentioned, think before canceling your score. Come and talk to me, because what you may not consider a competitive LSAT score is actually a very competitive LSAT score. You want to study 20 to 25 hours over 2 to 3 months in minimal preparation for that exam, and ideally take it in the summer before your senior year or the summer before the fall you want to be applying. Applications. It's important to know that law schools use rolling admissions. Typically, the application season, as you'll have it, will open beginning of September to middle of October. And while they may state that they have application deadlines in winter into spring, they are reviewing applications as they are submitted. It is important to follow each school's directions. When it comes to how an application process works, the overriding theme is it depends. It depends on the particular school. And so for that reason, do not hesitate to ask admissions representatives any questions. Calling the admissions office, emailing the admissions office, asking questions at events like the law school fair, or if you have the opportunity to visit a particular school, admissions representatives want to hear from you. I hear from students a lot hesitancy about wanting to reach out to admissions reps, but they want you to be able to make the best decision and have all the information to make that decision. So do not hesitate to reach out and ask them a particular question. When it comes to doing your research, again, make your own list of important criteria. And along with that, use rankings cautiously. I know that US News and World Report comes out every year with their top rankings of law schools. And many in the law school area, from pre-law advisors to law school admissions representatives, will say to use the rankings cautiously. I think it can be a great way to find particular schools, but there are some fantastic schools that may not necessarily be in the top 15. I always like to share with students that the most recent law school class, for example, the Davidson students or applicants who applied and matriculated at over 30 different law schools. And finally, when you're researching as much as possible, visit the schools, either virtually or perhaps in person, going to law school fairs, etc. When it comes to financing, apply for and ask for fee waivers. Again, the worst that can happen is that they say no, but you won't know unless you apply. Make sure that you're comparing like schools. Make sure that you're comparing apples to apples instead of apples to oranges when it comes to comparing how much a school may cost. And also be sure to look at their scholarship opportunities. Sometimes a school that may look more expensive on paper actually could be less expensive when you factor in the scholarship opportunities that they may have for you. And don't accrue more debt than necessary. Getting back to the idea of making your own criteria, getting back to the idea of using rankings cautiously, there are some fantastic law schools out there where you can get a great legal education where you are not going to be accruing nearly as much debt. So what to focus on now? So in this current or even the spring semester, strive to keep this academic year strong. Start thinking about how you're going to study for the LSAT. Before the spring semester ends, secure your letter of recommendation writers. Reach out to those faculty or professors or coaches or advisors who you think you might be asking to write your letters of recommendation, and see if they are available to do so. And then start thinking about what your summer plans might be. If you're doing study abroad, doing an internship, if you're working, volunteering, whatever it would be, confirm those summer plans. In the summer, you want to be studying for or taking the LSAT. Let's start beginning to research and possibly visiting schools. And I think it's also helpful to start working on your personal statements and other essays. The more that you can do during the summer months, the less that you'll have to be doing in the fall when the application cycle kicks in and you're also trying to do your academic classes here at Davidson. And finally, I wanted to point out some upcoming events that we have over this next coming week. Starting next Tuesday, October 25th, I will be hosting a virtual session about how to make the most of the law school fair. Many, or probably most of you, haven't had the opportunity to attend an in-school in-person, event like this. And so we'll be talking about tips and strategies on how you can make the most of it. William and Mary School of Law, which is located in Williamsburg, Virginia. It's a pretty popular law school that many Davidson students apply to and matriculate at. They're actually not able to attend the law school fair this year, but they love talking to Davidson students so much that they've actually set up their own evening virtual coffee chats next Thursday, October 27th. If you want to take the opportunity to chat with the admissions dean from William and Mary, she's reserving her time on Zoom to speak with you. The law school fair, again, taking place next Tuesday, Tuesday, November 1st, not next Tuesday, but Tuesday, November 1st, here in the Union. We'll also be having a program that night, and this is actually going to be an in-person program. Seton Hall University's Director of Admissions, who is attending the law school fair that day, is going to be sticking around campus to host an in-person meeting that evening. I've submitted my law school application. Now what? So lots of students have questions about letters of continued interest, what to do if you're on a wait list, what to do if you're on an invisible wait list, how do you ask for scholarship reconsiderations, and the director of admissions at Seton Hall is going to answer all of those questions. And finally, a really cool program that we have coming up Thursday, November 3rd, we will have representatives from Duke's Sanford School of Public Policy. So I know we've been talking about law school, but oftentimes I'll be talking to students, and while they're thinking that their interests are related to getting a law degree, their interests might actually be related to getting a degree in public policy. And so what's the difference? And the representatives from the public policy school, as well as a current student and graduate of the program, both of whom are Davidson alums, will be attending the panel to talk about their experience and talk about what it is that they're doing and what they plan to do with their degree in policy. You can find all of these programs and register for all of these programs in Handshake. If you go to your Handshake account and click on events, just put in the word law for keyword, and all of these particular events will come up. I hope this has been helpful to you. Again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can schedule an appointment with me through Handshake. You can email me at kerobinson@davidson.edu, or certainly take advantage of drop-ins. I'm hosting drop-ins every Tuesday afternoon from 1 to 5 in the Matthews Center. I look forward to working with you. Have a great day.